Welcome to the San Ramon Valley Unified School District's Board of Education meeting. We want to let everyone know that we are recording this meeting and it can be live streamed on the district's YouTube channel. So first we'll start with attendance, and just to mention that our student board member, Travis Hodges, he is absent this evening. He is attending Boys and Girls State. I'm guessing that's track. Assumption I'm making.
It's a leadership development.
Oh, a leadership. Oh, great. Okay, great. So anyway, so we'll see him in July. Is it Rachel?
Hello, good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Rachel Hurd and I am the trustee representing Area 5.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jesse Van Zee, and I am trustee representing Area 1.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for spending some time with us. I'm Susanna Wardway, representing Area 4.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Shelley Clark, representing Area 2.
And I'm Laura Bratt, representing Area 3. So next we'll do Pledge of Allegiance, if we could stand.
I pledge allegiance to the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Great. So before we begin our official business, Trustee Van Zee has a statement that he'd like to make.
Yeah, thank you so much, President Bratt. An event occurred yesterday, and after discussion with legal counsel, decided to make a public comment on it. But I wanted to be precise with my words, so I did write it down, and I will be reading. Yesterday, I received a threatening email to my district email account that was allegedly from the husband of a district employee. It's being investigated. After discussing this email with legal counsel at F3, I was advised to make a public statement to denounce this behavior. The email I received threatened my 5 children who are enrolled in the district schools, and that they would be targeted academically in their classrooms unless I changed the way I vote on certain matters that come before the board. Now, as an important aside, I know and have met so many of our teachers in this district, and I find it offensive that this person would suggest that our amazing teachers would ever stoop to that level of conduct. I think it's safe to say that the path for me to get onto this board has not been an easy one for me or my family. However, my family and we care so much about this community, and we care about all the students that are in this district. So I was able to push through the negative vitriol that was directed towards me during that time. And I know people have differing opinions from me, and I will vigorously defend their rights to speak freely and oppose my ideas and my positions that I take. However, my kids, they're just kids. And they're kids who enjoy hanging out with their friends, just being kids. They enjoy our schools and they love their teachers. And if people have a problem with me and my positions, come to me, but leave my kids out of this. Also, on the advice of legal counsel, I've reported this incident to the appropriate authorities and will take all necessary steps to ensure the safety of my family and to uphold the integrity of our school district and not bowing to these threats. While I do not appreciate any threats being made towards me or my family, and I would not appreciate them being made to anybody on this board, I think it's foolish actions like this that will actually only strengthen my resolve to stand up for what is right and to represent my constituents that put me in this seat. And I'm going to continue to do so to the best of my ability and support my fellow trustees in doing the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. And I just want to kind of add, I appreciate you making that statement. And I think it's important for the community to understand that, all of us, we've chosen to be in the public domain. We chose to run. We chose to lift up our voice in this way. And with that, we've learned to develop a thick skin. Our kids didn't choose for us to be board members, and they're kids and they're in our schools, and it just makes me so sad to think that that we as parents, have to think about that when we have the passion and the heart to be advocates for all the students. So I just wanted to say that. So thank you, Jesse. All right, so next we will move to report of actions taken in closed session. So at this evening's closed session, the board made the following appointments in a 5-0 vote effective July 1st, 2024. Jamie Shackelford, Assistant Principal, Doherty Valley High School, and Michael Mimiaga, Director 1, Transportation Services. So congratulations to Jamie and Michael. We're excited about your new positions and welcoming Michael to the district. Regarding expulsion case number 3/2324, may I have a motion to approve the stipulated suspended expulsion agreement?
So moved.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Hurd. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, great. Next, we move to acceptance of minutes. May I have a motion to accept the minutes from the June 11th, 2024 board meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
I wasn't here.
I'm sorry, you were not. Thank you for reminding me of that. Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0. 4-0 with one abstention.
Great. Next, we'll move on to agenda approval. May I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Ordway. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
And next, consent agenda approval. So consent items are considered routine in nature and are approved by combining them into a single vote. Only a member of the board may request that a consent item be removed from the consent agenda to be considered and voted on separately. The public may comment on a consent agenda before the board approves the consent agenda. And I don't believe we have public comment. Does anyone on the board have any, want to pull anything? No? Okay, great. So can I get a motion to accept the agenda?
Yeah, I'll move the motion
Consent
to
agenda.
accept consent.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Ordway and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
All right, great. So at this point, I usually explain our public comment, but as I look around the audience, I think everyone is familiar with how public comment works. So we'll skip that part. And we will move on to reports to the board. So our first item is 9.1, which is public comment of non-agendized items. And it looks like I have 3. And I will take a minute, and it looks like there's one more. So if anyone else has any yellow cards to pass in for non-agendized, please bring them forward. No, it's all good. Okay, great. So let's start with Teresa Rader. After Teresa will be Cyrus Matan Omnia. Oh.
These are my comments. So I'm a very loquacious person, so. It's just not here. It's just that time to express it.
Hey, thank you for this opportunity to address the San Ramon Valley Unified School District Board, and to you, Dr. Malloy, who has spearheaded and provided stewardship for change and growth in a district filled with complexities, innovations, recalcitrant individuals, and who has striven to make this a positive learning organization for all. My regret really is that I have never served under your tutelage. I would imagine that would have been a great opportunity. At the previous board meeting, textbook selection was on the agenda. I'm concerned about the rhetoric that has been expressed about how books might be selected. There should be no tolerance for limiting the knowledge of what students should be exposed to. And yet there are those who have been asking us to narrow student opportunities for growth and limit their exposure to ideas. This is wholly unacceptable. As educators, we can never acquiesce to limiting student learning. When selecting textbooks, which I've been a part of many of those committees, and other supplemental materials, instructors should select textbooks and other materials that are suitable for the subject matter in the course, that support appropriate pedagogical approaches to teaching within a discipline, and that promote a goal of providing high quality educational experience. Another issue that has been in the forefront of this district since I've been attending these meetings recently is the request to ban books. Do not ban. Practice discernment instead. Consider yourselves as a school board, a bastions of civilization. Teachers, administrators, school board members, you are ensuring that your students have a safe environment to wrestle with tough conversations, philosophical dilemmas, and more mature ideas as they navigate becoming adults. Should murder be punishable by death? Shakespeare tiptoes to this question in Hamlet. What happens when society's norms fall away in the wake of desperation and survival? Read Lord of the Flies. How can we develop empathy in middle schoolers? Refugee by Alan Gatz might be a good start. All of these stories have been banned in one form or another in the United States. If any of you think that these books include political messages, Refugee, sexual content, Hamlet, violence, Lord of the Flies, note that you will have to ban a text that holds great weight for many, the Bible. Please be discerning. Don't block. Provide opportunities. Keep looking at books that are well received by critics and other patrons, that have literary awards and are relatable to students. Trust your librarians, your teachers, and your children. I could say so much more. I could, because I could talk for hours. In conclusion, because I really want to say this. Oh my God. All right, so just read the end, because discern, don't ban.
After Cyrus is Mike Arata.
Good afternoon, board. I'm here to talk about my subject again. It's just kind of becoming important subject to me. And in March 25th, I came here for the first time, and then I ended up finding that it's going to be opportunities to become a substitute teacher. I applied on time, and since then I've been working feverishly, very hard, and trying to basically meet all the requirements. And I believe I have done everything, and nothing wrong I did in this time. And I have paid for CTC, for 2 fingerprints and everything. And then in the last minute, I'm being denied the job with no reason. And I have sent 2 emails to Ms. Van Star to explain the reasoning. She hasn't done it. And Ms. Jones over here, she knows everything basically about the subject. And then I have sent lots of emails, about 50, 60 emails to Ms. Fisher to have basically for attention of everyone in the meeting or in the board. So I'm here for the second time asking for fair treatment. I believe I am being unfairly treated in the situation. I don't have any issues, and somebody is either discriminating me or unfairly treating me, and I believe it's my right to defend myself and get the job. So I'm looking for, the person, Ms. Vance, that also attacked me, my personality, calling me aggressor. I believe she should have a mentioning in an email or something, an apology, because I'm not aggressive. And then also I'm looking for her to send me a job offer. And that's where I'm here, and I'm asking for that. So I'm gonna basically insist that I need to get that job, because it's very important at this point. Has become very important to me, because I believe I am unfairly being treated. And I'm an American. I'm not born over here, unfortunately, but fortunately I'm here. I'm from Iran, and I believe maybe some issues that between two countries at this point going on because they have a dictatorship over there, and maybe the United States government, they are in head to head, and something that may be impacting the Star decisions, or however they are supporting of Hamas, which is fighting with Israel. That may be another issue. But anyway, I have here something to on top of it to basically bring it to your attention that this young lady is singing. So,
Thank you, Cyrus.
well, okay.
Thank you.
It's about the page.
Next up is Mike Arata, and after Mike Arata is Bob Allen.
As summer gets into full swing, area families will be making plans for the upcoming new school year. Parents who've noticed SRVUSD's counterproductive equity distractions from the teaching and learning of knowledge and skills should be looking for alternatives to allow their children to escape your harmful programs and to join in the district's rapid enrollment decline. It's remarkable, meanwhile, that so many of your adopted programs and materials directly violate your established policies. Policy 410, for example, says your program activities and practices shall be free from discrimination based on race, color, ancestry, national origin, ethnic group identification, unquote. But your adopted text stamped racism, anti-racism in you encourages appreciation of straight out of Compton's vile racism and misogyny as a source of, quote, change and empowerment, unquote. Meanwhile, this book is anti-racist, capitalizes every race but white, and the author explicitly touts her own prejudice against whites. Policy 6141.2 requires that staff not interfere with development of students' religious traditions, but staff ignores that requirement with captive audience queering the classroom, their term, read-alouds, in TK through grade 3, and secretive 4th and 5th grade LGBTQ PRISM clubs, which should require opt-in parental permission, but do not. The small picture shown in the middle of the right side of the sign is a note to a teacher by a PRISM Club participant. This 4th or 5th grader cannot spell very well, but claims a pansexual identity while requesting classroom display of the so-called pride flag. Such solicitation of vulnerably impressionable young children in adult-level sex and gender activism is a routine outrage here. Policy 4219.24 prohibits displaying or transmitting sexual objects, pornography, pictures, or depictions to a student. But in fact, that's just another Potemkin policy here, more for show than for substance. Your high school libraries have many dozens of depraved pornographic books, ranging from illustrated how-to sex manuals to degenerate novels, all curated by permissive librarians, cosmetically self-characterized as intensively trained professionals. Now the porn is moving also into classrooms with your 4-to-1 approval in the last few meetings. Meanwhile, your parents' rights and responsibilities document pretends that you regard parents as partners, where that's something you actually believed. You would not demand that sudden claims of gender identity changes by even your youngest children be hidden from parents unless the children give permission. And these are 4- and 5-year-olds in some cases. Your actual partners are your radical CTA union activists. Unless and until that arrangement changes, taxpayers should oppose any new funding of your various schemes, and parents should do their best to help kids escape your harmful programs.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is Bob Allen. After Bob Allen is Monica Whitty.
Hello, I'll be subverting no stereotypes by starting off with a musical reference. No, this is not how we do this. There's a part in the musical Hamilton where Hamilton throws the political weight behind his political weight behind Jefferson, even though the two have never agreed on any issue. I must assume this event or something close to it happened historically. My U.S. history is a little rough. If you watch the board meetings, one might assume that Trustee Van Zee and myself do not share many of the same political views. We do agree on one thing, however. We want the best education, the best support, and the best teachers for every student in the SRVUSD. Trustee Van Zee has always listened to the concerns brought by myself, even if I might disagree with his ultimate opinion or vote. This is how the system works: discussion, points, counterpoints, and finally a decision. What is not part of that process is threatening the people who've decided to serve this community by being on the school board. If you also watch the board meetings, you see all of the trustees being subjected to various opinions from the community, including my own. During the pandemic, when the school board had an almost impossible job of navigating mandates from the state, their constituents' demands, and students' learning, the trustees had a metric ton of vitriol and insults thrown at them. I will always remember one community member who compared teachers and board members to North Korean prison guards. This is also not the way the process is supposed to happen, and yet our trustees listen because that is the law and the community has the right to speak. And with all this, I know every board member sitting up there wants one thing: the best education, the best support, and the best teachers for every student in SRVUSD. The teachers, administrators, and staff of SRVUSD will not allow comments or actions from parents or students to affect reporting the academic performance of any student. This is part of the job, and it's part of being a professional. We set the standards and we have the hard conversations because we want your students to succeed. It's not just words when we say all of our students are all of our students. Is this profession sometimes a struggle? Sometimes. Do teachers get frustrated? Often. But we're human beings. I'm going to skip over that part. To learn how to deal with these issues, to de-escalate, to redirect conversations and actions into productive learning is required by this position. As a community member, as a teacher, and as a human being, I must condemn this action by a community member. Again, every person in front of me is committed to the best education, the best support, and the best teachers for every student in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And last up is Monica Whitty. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I'm OG Strogatz, and I'm pinch hitting for Monica Whitty. And we are co-presidents of the Danville Alamo Walnut Creek branch of the American Association of University Women, AAUW. And on behalf of our branch, I would like to read a thank you sonnet to Dr. Malloy. Dear Superintendent Malloy, we send best wishes and congrats on your new job. Though well-deserved, don't ask us to pretend to let you go without a private sob. You joined us when the world was on the ropes, with COVID wreaking havoc every day. Your grounded leadership inspired hope and strength, enabling us to find our way. You've helped us craft a bright, viable vision. You've anchored all the work in student voice. You've calmly heard the praise, the derision. You've modeled finding common ground by choice. We offer deepest gratitude to you. We'll back the district's work in all we do.
Thank you, OG. All right, that's it for non-agendized public comment. So next we have 9.2 Associate President's Report. I don't know, Melinda, are you good? I don't think anyone else is here, so Vice President Melinda Daly for Servia.
Hi, everybody. I'm tall, sorry. Hi, everybody. Like Trustee Brat said, I am Melinda Daly. I'm Vice President of Servia. I'm filling in tonight for Laura Finko. And I apologize that I wasn't here at the last meeting when Dr. Malloy was officially recognized. I was still in what I'm calling graduation land, which is otherwise known as celebrating my son's graduation from Cal. So I have to give a shout out to the entire class of 2024, to all the parents, and to the teachers who helped get all those seniors right across the finish line. So thank you so much. I also would like to take a minute to speak to Dr. Malloy. I appreciate everything you did throughout your tenure to build a positive working relationship. We as labor felt as though we were included and we were not perceived as an afterthought. So you weren't always perfect, but neither were we, which is bound to happen in life. However, we were able to move on from these moments instead of having them stall us. No grudges, just problem solving. And I hope this model continues in the future since it is truly the best way to support our students. And all the best to you, Dr. Malloy, on your next adventures. Since we're on the essential topic of supporting students, I do want to add on to what Trustee Van Zee brought up just a little bit a while ago. And I want to say first, thank you for acknowledging that what you heard was not what our educators do. I think it's important to reiterate in this association's report that there is no merit to the notion that students would be targeted academically by an educator out of spite. Full stop. To suggest otherwise hits at the very core of who we are. We are SRVUSD strong for kids. No matter what may be occurring in an election, a board meeting, a parent conference, an email exchange, all of that vanishes when we are with our students. It is imperative that all students feel safe at school so they can learn and thrive. And I feel like it's a big jump, but as I was reflecting on this, I feel like we're wrapping up this year, but next year is looming and we have so much work to do. So I hope everyone has a restful and relaxing summer because we will be right back here before you know it. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. Next, we'll move on to 9.3 Superintendent's Report. Dr. Malloy.
Thank you, President Brett. So this is my opportunity to share some reflections because I said last week that I would wait till my last board meeting. And I just would like to take this time just to highlight a few important aspects of our time together over the last 4 years. And I start where I think we are in this room, but way more than just this room. School districts cannot serve students well without effective governance. I don't think we talk about it enough, actually. But when our elected officials, you, work closely, respectfully with senior staff and our entire team in a way that understands each other's roles like we do, we can do anything, no matter what the challenges are. And for me, one of the highlights of being in the San Ramon Valley Unified School District is the privilege and opportunity to work with all of you. Because having been a superintendent for 15 years, I think I can say this. When governance goes off the rails, students aren't served. And I'm grateful to you and to our cabinet team and our entire staff because we've worked so well together. And I'm going to carry that with me as a model. And when I work with superintendents across the country, I'll be able to draw upon our experience to help others think about how do you do this work well? And then I think about how we launched this whole concept of, you know, we got to broaden the definition of success while still being excellent in all the ways that San Ramon Valley has been excellent. And the statement that I will say on this last board meeting, which has probably captured more people in terms of the feedback I've received, is our students need to be great students and happy, healthy human beings who can change the world. I say those terms often because we mean it. Our strategies and steps and practices support it. We've got ways to go, but it's what drives our work. And that is so important. I'll remember how we have made the commitment that all students deserve to be safe, cared for, respected, and included, which means that they do have access to what they need, which means we do call out any barriers that might exist, which means that we aren't afraid of wrestling with the concepts of intent versus impact. And I hold that up because this has been probably one of the most challenging aspects of our work since I've been with you. But I'm grateful because I will never forget a note I received from a 10th grade student after a particularly difficult time. And this student happens to identify as African American, saying, I don't feel capable of raising my voice right yet, but I'm grateful to you and the board for doing so. I've kept that note because that is a sign of what leaning into the tough stuff means. And I carry that because I remember many days when I wondered if we were going to be able to get to a better place, but I truly believe step by step we do. Relationships and partnerships matter. And, you know, when I think back on, yes, COVID took the life out of us in so many ways, literally and figuratively. And then all of the challenges that emerge with the differing views that exist in our community sometimes, and the way things can get personal sometimes when it never needs to be, even when we disagree. I recall how we have worked hard at building relationships with our staff, with our union groups, with our ed funds, with our council of PTAs, with our broader community, with our parents and caregivers, town of Danville, city of San Ramon. And not least important, but actually most important, I can see explicit differences to how our student voices have been elevated. And I shared that recently, so I'm not going to go into that tonight, but that I trust will continue in San Ramon. I know that the continuous improvement process is about as exciting as watching paint dry to most people who listen. But for someone who gets quite excited about it, you can't improve without a system and a process that helps us do so. When you think about our MTSS work, which has really supported our literacy work and our math work, when we think about that, it's not just academic, but it's also social emotional. That's part of that MTSS process. When we think about how we bring our information to you in this room and that there's a through line all the way to the classroom where we have places and times that we evaluate, that we reflect, that we figure out what to do next. We're not perfect. We've got ways to go in certain areas, but there's a system. It's not just haphazard. And I'm really grateful for your assistance in helping us get to this place. And last but not least, I know that education is the way it is sometimes because we don't change easily. And I'm not talking about San Ramon right now. I'm talking about education tends to be a status quo kind of enterprise. Nobody means any harm by it. It's just we all went to school, which means we're all comfortable with what we know. And we all then want to share what we hope to see happen, which sometimes is to keep things the way it was when I was in school. And to some points, that's not a problem, because some of the things that we all learned in school, however many years ago that was, is good. But what I love is whether it's thinking about AI and what it means to transform learning, not just to talk about kids cheating. When we think about high school transformation, what does it mean to give kids ownership for their learning, not just take exams? When we think about exploring different staffing models that Melanie is leading, or when we think about where does special education need to go in order to be the most effective we possibly can? What I appreciate about our district, and I'll go all the way back to when I was in the interview to be hired to be here. I looked at all the data from San Ramon. I thought, 96, 97% in everything? I wonder what it is that the district wants different, because I listen very closely whenever I'm thinking about a new position. And I'll never forget through that process that what the board at the time shared, and there are some of you that were there, 97 is not 100. There are some kids that we haven't been able to reach. We need to figure out who they are, where they are, and what they need. And that is what we are looking for. Well, that was as exciting to me as anything. And so I know that when I reflect on my time with you, with our community, with our staff, with our students, with our parents and caregivers, I am so grateful because I can see how our collective efforts have made such a difference. And the greatest gift that I could receive personally, which is not about me, but I have to say this one is really something I'm going to take with me, is that when you were engaged in the process for the new superintendent, how many people in our community said, please find someone who is willing to continue the course with you and to take it to that next level. Well, that is really exciting from my perspective, knowing that you're leading the district. I think CJ Kemick is going to be amazing in this seat. To my cabinet team, many of whom are here, many of whom aren't, because I said it's the last meeting of the year, it's summer. But I am so grateful to all of you because you've seen me in the good, the bad, and frankly, the ugly, as we have tried to lead through really, really challenging times. But the important last comment I want to make, and I mean this sincerely, is as much as I will carry San Ramon Valley Unified with me, and I hope that I've left some things that have made the difference for this time, none of us is indispensable. Shared leadership matters. Collectively, we know what needs to happen. I will be rooting from the sidelines. I won't get in the way, but I won't be far. I'm here to help in any way I can. And thank you so much for the privilege of being your superintendent. I am very blessed.
Thank you, John, for your words and for your 4 years that you gave to us. We greatly appreciate it. All right, so next we'll move on to action items, public hearings. 10.1, consideration of adoption of resolution number 77/2324 in the matter of ordering the regular governing board member election specifications of election order. And so just so we're all aware, seats for area 2 and 3 will be on the November 5th, 2024 ballot. And this is the official request to order the election. Do any trustees have any questions?
I would move approval of the resolution.
Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Ordway. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Brott.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Moving on to 10.2, consideration of adoption of the 24-25 local control and accountability plan. That's the LCAP, local indicators and federal addendum. So that would be Executive Director of Secondary Education, John Campipiano.
Good evening. Thank you for reviewing. Just in terms of updates on the comments we received from last week, we've made the edits. There was one by Trustee Van Zee around the date 2320 or 34 or something like that. Changed that to current year. And Trustee Hurd, who allowed us to notice some corrections we could make in terms of language. And there was no changes to any actions, metrics, or goals. And we received no input on that and no actions were changed. Any questions?
Any questions? No. All right. We do not have public comment for this. Okay, so I believe we need an action to approve. Can I get a motion?
I'm for the motion to approve.
Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Ordway and seconded by Board Member Clark. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Brott.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Can I just add a comment, Laura?
Yes.
I would like to thank our LCAP advisory committee. I think I have the name wrong, but the committee that put in the time through the whole year. It's a really important part of the process, and it's a better process when they commit, which it sounds like that has gotten a lot better. So I'd like to thank them. And I'd also like to thank John and Kit and Stella and Evan and everyone in Ed Services that was part of that, Christine, because even though we don't get a lot of supplemental money, I think we are really putting the honest foot forward in doing the LCAP the way it is intended to be done.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, so next we'll move to 10.3, consideration of adoption of the 24-25 district budget, including the excess reserves report. And so that's Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations, Stella Kemp.
Yes, good evening, trustees and Superintendent Malloy. I want to point out that in addition to the presentation that was done last week, we have added one page into the budget document, which is page 20, which outlines our excessive reserves report, of which there are none. So we have made no changes to the budget or the document, other than the update that we made following the report that was sent to the board at the last board meeting. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Trustees, no. We do have one public comment. And if anyone else has public comment for this, if they could bring it up. So we have Mike Arata.
The budget you're adopting, along with some of the reductions planned along with it, seek to preserve the fiction that SRVUSD needs even more money than it will spend already. The graph in the sign shows what I mean. It shows 3 hills and 2 mountains, all representing changes affecting the district in the time since a $100 parcel tax was rejected here in 1991. The orange hill represents enrollment, which reached its high point of 32,452 in 2017-18. It's been dropping ever since, now to 28,710 in your current estimate. The dark blue hill shows CPI inflationary increases over time. The light blue hill represents the compounded effect of enrollment changes and inflation. The light green mountain in the far background shows increases in total SRVUSD spending. As would be expected, most of that increase has been in salaries and benefits, represented in the dark green mountain. The bracketed climb between the top of the light blue mountain, call it the base camp, and top of the darker green mountain, call it the Everest summit, represents the extent to which your salary and benefit increases have grown to exceed the combined effect of enrollment changes and inflation. In absolute dollar terms, just since 2015, when your existing parcel tax was renewed, your salary and benefit spending growth has exceeded the combined effect of inflation and enrollment changes by $110 million, as represented by the bracket that's in the picture. You're presently lamenting an anticipated $16.5 million revenue loss, or $23.3 million if your parcel tax fails again to be renewed. But again, the reality is that you'd have to lose $110 million in funding to drop back to a level actually proportionate to enrollment changes and inflation since 2015. The further reality is that you yourselves are contributing mightily to inflation with the rate at which you expand your spending over the normal factors that would expand it. You claim, of course, that you've got to be competitive with other local districts, but that's merely an excuse for continuing the never-ending game of compensation leapfrog. Pleasanton and Lafayette and Walnut Creek increased their pay and benefits, so you do the same. Then they undertake another round of increases of their own, and the cycle continues in perpetuity. Goes on across the country and in every school district that I know of. So starting teachers here now receive about $65,000 in salary alone for a 186-day contract year, even before your next round of raises, versus the 240 annual workdays common for most people. Yes, something similar occurs in the private corporate sector. I'm certainly aware of that, but they still must somehow remain competitive or they go out of business. You have no such constraints. You have a virtual monopoly. SRVUSD therefore went up by 8.5% in compensation, then 6% more, even as your CASP scores got worse and your LGBTQing of the classroom and queering of the classroom and pornography and
Thank you, Mike.
accelerated.
Right. So, do trustees have any comments, or should we move? Should we have any comments or move for approval?
I would move adoption of our 2024-25 budget.
I second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Clark. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Brat.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Stella. Next, we have 10.4, which is consideration of adoption of resolution number 76, 23-24, directing staff to develop a budget reduction plan for the 25-26 school year. And that's Assistant Superintendent Kemp.
Yes. So thank you for the adoption of the 24-25 budget. We now look to the preparation for 25-26. And part of that that we need to do in order to be able to ensure the district's fiscal solvency and that we are fulfilling our obligations under the strategic directions to be good stewards of the resources that are provided to us by the community, have identified the need to make ongoing reductions of $16.5 million, beginning with the 25-26 school year. In order for the current budget that we are submitting to this county, the 24-25 budget, we need to include a resolution to show the county that we have direction and board support to launch this work with our Budget Advisory Committee. Current Board Policy 3100 outlines the development of a Budget Advisory Committee from superintendent or designee, which we intend to launch in early fall, so August, September. And this committee would meet to evaluate and review opportunities for cost-saving measures and provide recommendations to the board by December that then we would begin to use and implement over the budget planning cycle for the 25-26 school year. So this resolution is part of the budget package that we will send to the county.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Stella?
Who are you envisioning being on the committee?
I think this is something to work with President Bratt. If you're interested to serve on this committee, to submit your name, and at the July board meeting, then we could make an update to the board assignments, committee assignments then.
And then in terms of community members or staff, is
Yes.
students?
Yeah.
Will this be a bit like a steering committee?
Absolutely. It's kind of, we would like to run it similar to our facilities, long-range facilities plan committee. So we'll start with the needs assessment. We'll look at how things align to the strategic directions and then make some recommendations. And we'll bring those to the board then and prioritize those as we move forward.
Well, the Facilities Oversight Committee has an application process and people get chosen and it's very limited, right? Like it's 15-ish people.
Yes.
Are you imagining this being a little farther reaching like our steering committees are, or?
I'm still
pretty
thinking through
selective?
that. I'm working on developing that I have somebody who's helping me behind the scenes to
Okay.
plan it. And I plan to bring that forward to the board in July.
Great.
So you can have some input and then we'll, the broader our reaches for selecting, for inviting, either do we invite or do we have people apply? And so since this isn't a Brown Act committee, we could go either way. And so I'd like to bring some options. If we go through the application process, it might take a little bit longer to select the committee versus suggest some names and we go out to those community members who could come in and serve on the committee. So there's two ways.
Seen at CSBA, I've seen presentations where districts have been very successful in terms of creating great understanding in the community about how all of the budget works and the challenges, and then they end up with a great speakers bureau of ambassadors who understand it. And so if we could do it that way, I think there'd be huge benefits in staff and parents and community members at large understanding the levers that exist in the budget.
Right.
Levers is a Mark Jewett word, former trustee.
And that really would be my preference would be to have an application process for that. It just might slow us down a little bit at the beginning to get launched because people are away for the summer and, we'd have to have a communication plan to advertise and recruit people.
Right.
And the one thing that we've talked about at Cabinet, Stella, if I can just add, is what we find when we look at our steering committees is where there is interest, people will apply quickly. And then we can probably, as long as we communicate effectively, have a quicker turnaround time. But to the extent that it could mirror our other similar committees that don't fall under the Brown Act, that consistency would probably help, because what we have found through our other committees is not only great education, great engagement, and great advice. So that's been a conversation that we've been having at Cabinet that Stella will carry forward.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? All right, we do not have public comment for this. So I need a motion.
I make a motion to adopt the resolution for the budget reduction plan.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Brat.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Stella. All right, moving on to 10.5, we have consideration of approval of addenda to employment agreements for contracted management employees. That's Dr. Malloy.
Thank you, President Pratt. Now I will speak to 10.5, consideration of approval of addenda to employment agreements. The recommended changes to the assistant superintendent contracts include a number of significant changes, including the placement of all 3 assistant superintendents on a new assistant superintendent CBO salary schedule and the elimination of the Me Too provision. Advancement on the salary schedule shall be pursuant to the terms indicated on the salary schedule and shall not be changed by any increase approved for the district's bargaining units. So in other words, our assistant superintendents will move on a salary schedule like all other employees who are new to the district, and they're moving through the years, but there will be no increases based upon negotiations. Additional recommended changes include a 224-day positive work year. Assistant superintendents will no longer accrue vacation time or holiday pay. Any previously accrued vacation time shall be paid to the assistant superintendents in 2 installments in August and January. To maintain consistency and stability in district leadership and in the other major operations which these managers lead and oversee, we're requesting approval of the attached addenda to those employee agreements which will extend the term of each to June 30th, 2026. So what you'll see there is the 2-year term now, and then upon a positive performance evaluation each year after, there'd be an extension of 1 year to keep that consistency that is required. The recommendation before us this evening is to amend the contract for all 3 assistant superintendents and the associated salary schedule as follows. Christine Huardo, Assistant Superintendent, Educational Service, contract to be amended as follows. Move to salary step 4, $296,107 of the new Assistant Superintendent CBO salary schedule. Melanie Jones, Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources, contract to be amended as follows. Salary step 2, $279,110 of this schedule. Stella Kemp, Assistant Superintendent, Business Services, CBO, contract to be amended as follows. Step 5, $304,990 of that schedule. So again, based upon your direction, I believe we have captured what your interests were. Similarly, in working with our assistant superintendents, and thanks to them for their requests that you see in the contract as well. And I believe that what has been brought before you does bring to a resolution something that you have been talking about for quite some time. And I hope that it meets with your approval this evening.
I have a question, just a clarifying question, just so that we all understand. So once the assistant superintendents have reached the top step, which I believe is 7, what happens after that point?
Thank you for clarifying or asking that question. And it is in the contract, which our public has seen, that when they reach the top of the salary schedule, their contract mirrors the superintendent's contract, which is that there would be the 3% increase unless our bargaining units received less, and that their increase or no increase would mirror the bargaining units only if it is less. It would never be more.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from?
I think just a comment that I'll make, and it's kind of a good story of how we as a board heard concerns from the community, and Dr. Malloy graciously jumped into a contract negotiation that he did not have to modernize a contract, to uncouple it from the Me Too, and really pave the way for these other 3 negotiations to happen. And I do believe we've modernized it. We've reduced liability and risk on accumulating PTO or vacation days. There's been a lot of positive things, and I think it was all done in good faith with transparency. And I think that it really was just a great thing to watch, to see kind of all these things work together for really what is the best part for our community and for our district. So thank you for everybody involved. And I know Shelley and I had some initial conversations that moved on to some other subcommittees on that. And yeah, I think that this is one of those things that we got to celebrate the wins sometimes too. When we talk about the negatives, we can talk about the positives. So thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. I want to echo those comments. Thank you to Dr. Malloy and to all the superintendents for being willing to look at the contracts and listen to what we had to say. When I ran for office, this is one of the things that was on my platform was the Me Too. And we have some very qualified, high quality people here in our assistant superintendents. And not easily replaceable. So I want to thank all of you for your cooperation in this. I think it's the best thing for our community and I think it's equitable for everyone. So thanks to everybody who helped make this happen.
Thank you. And I don't believe we have public comment. So, oh, it's okay. So can we get a motion to approve?
I'd just like to add on to what Jesse and Shelley already said, but to thank my fellow newer additions to the board for pushing this forward. You know, we had a work study session on it and we heard from some folks and we heard the why we can't do this and you guys persevered. And I think what we came up with is something that is fair and is better. And I also want to thank our contracted positions for having faith in that there was a way to get to a win-win on this. And it's an example of what John was saying earlier, good governance. And it was done very collegially and professionally. And thank you.
Yeah, just want to add my thank you also to 3 assistant superintendents for being willing to work on this process as well as help Dr. Malloy to open that up. And yes, to my board colleagues to move this forward because this is really all for equity, right? It's an equitable, I think, step towards, yeah, in regards to salary and pay.
Thank you. And I'll echo the thank you to everyone involved. I think that this is valuable for our district and I hope it's valuable for everybody. So thank you. All right. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the addenda to the employment agreements for the contracted management employees, our 3 assistant superintendents.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Brat.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Right. Thank you. Moving on to informational items, we have 11.1, which is the November 2024 pre-election planning survey results. And that's Assistant Superintendent Stella Kemp.
So at the May 8th workshop that we, special board meeting workshop that we had with our architects, one of the directions that was given to staff was to, is it May the 8th? Yes, it was a Wednesday, May the 8th, the day following the election. We had discussion at the end of that workshop to go out and conduct a survey of our community regarding the parcel tax renewal and consideration for a general obligation bond measure. So I want to start this evening by saying that the board is not going to make any decision tonight. You are just receiving information regarding the research that was done by EMC. And you will have time to reflect on this because we can, while the election is in November and we have to, if we're going to put something on the ballot, much like the resolution that came this evening for the board member elections, we will have to bring a resolution in July at the July meeting or 2 resolutions, depending on what the board would like to do. And we could bring both. We could table one and put one forward, or we could table both of them. But this decision doesn't have to be made this evening. And I want to let the board know that you'll receive this information. You'll have a nice discussion, and then I can go whatever direction the board would like to do. If we want to delay, you want to think and talk to your community, you're welcome to do that. We are super flexible with the next steps on this. So I want to start by introducing, we have Jared Boygan in the room from Team Civics. And we have Jessica Polsky Sanchez here from EMC Research to share the polling results. Jessica, over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Well, I'm going to go through these poll results quickly and I'm more than happy to answer any questions following the presentation. So first, a few notes on the methodology of this poll. We did survey likely November voters here in San Ramon Valley Unified School District. Make sure that's working. Oh, totally has. Great. Okay, likely voters here in the district using multimodal methodology. So that incorporates live telephone interviews along with online interviews where we reach out to voters by text or email invitation to complete a survey online. Overall, we completed 800 interviews, which carries an overall margin of error of plus or minus 3.46 percentage points. But we also utilized what's called a split sample methodology. And I'll explain a little more on the next slide about this. But that's where we divided the overall sample of 800 in half in order to look at two possible scenarios. And so when we're looking at the results by each split, the margin of error is plus or minus 4.9 percentage points. And as you know, we have a good number of tracking polls of prior research here in the district among voters with which to compare the most recent survey results. We did conduct the survey just recently in late May and early June, so these results are very recent. So I mentioned we used a split sample methodology. We know that the district has different kinds of funding needs and was interested in exploring the feasibility of a renewal of the parcel tax along with the a potential bond measure. And so what we did was we used a split sample methodology where half of respondents heard about both a potential bond measure and a parcel tax renewal measure, whereas the other half heard only about a potential parcel tax renewal. And that was to help us understand if there might be an impact of putting both a bond and a parcel tax renewal on the measure at the same time, or whether there's no difference in support between those who hear about two measures versus just one parcel tax renewal. So some key findings here, and then I'll go through more detailed results. We do see the district continues to see very strong ratings when it comes to the quality of education provided by the local schools. Most voters also rate the safety and the condition of school buildings positively as well. Both a parcel tax renewal and a bond measure for the district receive initial support that's very close to their respective thresholds for passage in this poll. So a parcel tax renewal needs 2/3 support for passage. A bond measure needs 55%, and support is near that level for both of the measures in this poll. We see support for a parcel tax renewal measure is slightly higher among respondents who were not asked about a bond measure first. Although the difference is quite small, opposition messaging is also more impactful on those who are asked about both measures, suggesting to us that pursuing both measures this November could make a parcel tax renewal measure more vulnerable. When it comes to voter priorities, they place a particularly high importance on priorities that are ones that a parcel tax could fund, things like attracting and retaining highly qualified teachers and supporting high quality academic programs. While we do see a little bit of tax aversion among voters, we also see that 2/3 of local voters believe it is worthwhile to raise taxes in order to maintain high quality local public schools. And when we provide additional information about the benefits of these measures, voters find that to be compelling, particularly understanding that these measures would not present increases in tax rates, that the measures have oversight features, and that they help avoid teacher layoffs. However, we also see some vulnerability to potential opposition, especially opposition that's focused on economic uncertainty, ongoing tax burden, and things like this that could potentially compromise some level of support. So going into more detailed results and starting with this very general question, that's sort of like a warm-up question. It doesn't have to do with schools specifically. It really gauges overall optimism and pessimism. We ask, do you feel that things in your area are generally going in the right direction? Or do you feel that things have gotten pretty seriously off on the wrong track? And as you can see on this slide, we have trend data dating back to 2003, where we've been asking this question over time. And the blue trend line shows the portion saying things are headed in the right direction. The red one, things are off on the wrong track. We now see 63% saying things are headed in the right direction, 36% off on the wrong track. So pretty much we see a level of optimism as we have seen in the past about a year ago. So here are some district ratings. So we asked, regardless of whether or not you have children in school, please rate each of the following areas relating to the San Ramon Valley Unified School District. And you can see when it comes to ratings of the safety of local school buildings and grounds, the overall quality of education, student academic achievement and test scores, the condition of local school buildings and grounds, the job teachers are doing, and financial management, all of these achieve positive ratings, particularly the ones on the top. So the safety of buildings, the condition of buildings, the quality of education, voters perceive that all of these are quite good, with overall numbers in the 80% range positive. And I wanted to quickly share with you how these ratings have looked over time, because we have many years worth of trend data on the question of the overall quality of education. We have consistently seen very strong ratings over time, and this most recent survey, certainly no difference, with 82% rating the overall quality of education as excellent or good. When it comes to student academic achievement and test scores, a very similar story, 84% rating that as excellent or good and consistent over time. The job teachers are doing also more than 80% excellent or good, and that is consistent over time as well. Now here, when we ask voters to rate the condition of local buildings, school buildings and grounds, as well as the safety of local school buildings and grounds, you can see the numbers are quite positive, and in fact are even a little bit more positive in this survey than they were back in 2019 when we asked this question. We now see 88% saying the condition of school buildings and grounds is excellent or good, and on safety, we have 89% who perceive that the local school buildings and grounds are safe. And then on this question of financial management, how would you rate that? We do see 60%, a majority, rating that positively, and 38% who rate financial management here in the district as only fair or poor. This question gets at perception among voters of need for additional funding for the local schools. So would you say that public schools in San Ramon Valley Unified School District have a great need for money, some need for money, only a little need, or no real need for more money? And this is a question we have been asking for many years. You can see fairly steady, stable results over time. We're now seeing 17% who see a great need for additional funding, 41% some need, and a total of 59%. So a majority, but fewer than 2/3 see a need for additional funding for the schools. We look at that question based on whether they are voters who have students currently attending the local schools. That represents 32% of our sample of the local parents. Among parents, you can see perception of need for additional funding is considerably stronger. 28% see a great need, 37% some need, and you can see 20% little need and 13% no need. So perception of need for additional funding is greater among those who have more experience inside the schools. a few questions to help us understand sentiment around taxes broadly. So we asked, do you agree or disagree? It is crucial to have high quality public schools, even if it means raising taxes. You can see here 41% strongly agree and 28% somewhat agree, 68% in total, so about 2/3 who say maintaining high quality local public schools is worth raising taxes for. But then the second question, taxes are already too high. I would never vote for a tax increase, no matter how it might be used. We do see 30% who strongly agree and another 24% who somewhat agree. So just over half feeling a little bit averse to new taxes at this time. And finally, the San Ramon Valley Unified School District can be trusted to properly manage tax dollars. Majority 64% agree with that statement. So moving on to the potential measures that we tested, here is the language that we tested for both a potential bond measure and a parcel tax measure. On the left-hand side for the bond measure to upgrade outdated classrooms, science and vocational labs and technology to prepare students for college and careers, improve school safety, security, disabled students access, repair and upgrade aging, deteriorating roofs, wiring, plumbing, classrooms, and qualify for millions in state matching funds. Shall San Ramon Valley Unified School District measure be adopted, authorizing $525 million in bonds at a rate of $59 per 100,000 of assessed value? If the election were held today, would you vote yes or no on this measure? And then on the parcel tax on the right-hand side, to renew expiring local school funding without increasing current tax rates, to attract and retain highly qualified teachers, support science, technology, engineering, arts, math, reading, and writing, and prepare students for college and careers. Shall the district's measure be adopted, renewing its $144 annual parcel tax without increase, providing approximately $6.8 million annually that cannot be taken by the state for 9 years, exempting senior citizens, subject to citizen oversight and local control. So when we asked, you can see this slide showing, it shows the results among those who heard both the bond and the parcel tax measure on the left-hand side, and then among those who only heard about a potential parcel tax measure. Among those who heard both measures, initial support for the bond measure starts at 54% inclined to vote yes, 45% inclined to vote no. So that just falls 1 percentage point shy of the 55% threshold needed for passage for a bond. For the parcel tax renewal in that split sample, right near the 2/3 threshold, 67% needed for passage, we see 68% support initially among those who heard both measures. On the right-hand side, among those respondents who did not hear a bond measure followed by a parcel tax measure, support for the parcel tax measure is initially 70% and another 1% undecided, but lean toward yes for a total of 71 and 29% inclined to vote no. Really quickly wanted to show you the results on these two potential measures based on whether the voter is also a parent of a student attending the schools. So you can see support is a little bit higher for a bond among those who are current district parents, 61% compared to 51% among those who do not have a student in the San Ramon Valley Unified Schools. And for the parcel tax, this is the average between the two split samples. Overall, the average support is at 69%. Among those who are parents, support is at 75%. So stronger support among those current district parents. On this slide, this shows what happens when we asked voters about some of the potential components of both a bond measure and a parcel tax measure. The different colors are included just to try and highlight which projects are more related to a bond measure and which ones are more related to a parcel tax measure. The purple showing parcel tax, the blue showing bond. Certainly what stands out when you look at the colors is that some of the highest priorities when we ask about each of these items on a scale from 1 to 7, we're showing the portion who rated each one as a 6 or a 7, meaning extremely important. The items that rise to the top are related to a potential parcel tax renewal measure, including attracting and retaining highly qualified teachers, supporting academic programs in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, supporting academic programs in reading and writing, and supporting programs in reading and literacy for the youngest learners. These are among the highest priorities among those items we tested. You can see as you move a little further down the list, some of the items that are considered at least very important by voters that are more related to a potential bond measure, include qualifying for matching funds from the state, improving accessibility for students and staff with disabilities, ensuring older schools meet the same academic and safety standards as newer schools, and so on as you move down the list. But it is noteworthy that the portion rating some of those items as very important is lower than 55% for many of the items on this list. The next couple of slides have the information that we provided over the course of the survey about the benefits and the need for these measures. There's a little bit of confusing language because in some cases the message was presented to those who heard both a bond and a parcel tax. In some cases, those who didn't hear a bond measure did not hear a message directly related to a bond measure. So there's a little bit of programming language that you can see on this slide. Nevertheless, we asked each of these and we asked voters, how convincing is each of these messages as a reason to support the measures? And the pieces of information that rise to the top first and foremost, a message explaining that these measures will not raise tax rates above what homeowners are currently paying. They will simply continue the current tax rate to maintain vital funding for public schools and ensure facilities are safe and up to date. So 76% find that a convincing reason to support the measures. For those who heard about a parcel tax only, we said this measure is not a new tax. It continues an existing voter-approved parcel tax at the current rate to maintain vital education funding for public schools. So more than 70% consider that message about not increasing tax rates to be a convincing reason to support the measure or measures. After that, we have a message that explains the fiscal accountability components of a measure that is convincing to 74%. We have a message explaining what is at stake if a parcel tax renewal does not pass. The district will lose nearly $7 million per year in locally controlled funding for instruction over the next 9 years, which could lead to more than 50 teacher layoffs, growing class sizes, and cuts to academic programs. So learning that these things are at stake is very convincing. 70% say that's a convincing reason to support the parcel tax renewal measure. And then lastly on this slide, highlighting that maintaining high quality public schools in our neighborhood helps protect local property values. That is convincing to 71%. A second slide here with some additional messages that were tested in the survey. All of these are convincing to about 2/3 or more. We have information about how passing the bond measure would qualify schools for $124 million in matching funds. The measures would allow the district to continue to attract and retain skilled, experienced, and dedicated teachers. The measures shield our schools from the instability of the state budget situation. They help maintain high student achievement and ensure our district remains one of the highest performing school districts in the nation. Highlighting when it comes to a bond measure that many of the schools in the district are over 50 years old and in urgent need of repairs and modernization. That one does resonate with 74%. And then finally highlighting the benefits to safety of a potential bond measure, so the benefits to the safety of local schools. So after all of this information was offered over the course of the survey, we once again followed up, given everything you've heard, how would you vote now on the measure or the measures? And so you can see for among those who heard both measures, initial support for the bond started at 54%. We did see a substantial increase after information to 61% yes. For the parcel tax, we didn't see as much of an increase, but a minor increase from 68% initially to 72% after this information was provided. For those who did not hear about the two measures and only heard about a potential parcel tax renewal, as you saw, we started at 71% total yes, and support went up to 72%. So just a very slight increase. Landing in the same place after information among both split samples. We also wanted to understand vulnerability to potential opposition in order to assess the feasibility of the measures. We believe that's important. So we offered in the survey things that you might hear from an opponent. For example, mentioning that there were measures already on the ballot this year, that now is not the time for these measures because the cost of living is so high. There are going to be a lot of other tax measures on the ballot, these kinds of things that you might hear from an opponent of these measures. And then we ask a final time, given everything you've heard, how would you vote for the measures or measure? And you can see here that there is an impact of opposition for the bond measure. It goes from 61% support after information to 59% after opposition. That is still above 55%. And for the parcel tax renewal, among those who heard both measures, we did see a substantial drop from 72% to 63%. So that does drop below the threshold for passage among those who heard both measures. For those in the sample that were not presented with both a bond measure and a parcel tax renewal measure, we did see a drop in support from 72% to 66%, but the drop is not as precipitous, and the support stays just right near that 2/3 level. And then one final note in the data, just to add some additional information about the bond, we wanted to take a quick look at support over the course of the survey based on vote history. So what we're showing here is the vote progression among three different groups: the new or infrequent voters. Those are voters who voted in 0 to 3 out of the last 6 statewide elections, frequent voters who voted in 4 to 5 out of the last 6 elections, and perfect, quote unquote, perfect voters who voted in 6 out of the last 6 elections. So what's interesting about the vote progression by vote propensity here is that while newer or infrequent voters are a little more supportive, especially initially, we see increased support among those higher propensity voters. So we were able to sort of make a bigger impact among higher propensity voters, showing that additional information may be necessary in order to build support for a potential bond measure. One last note in the data, and then I'm happy to answer questions. We wanted to understand if there was a particular reason among those who voted yes or voted no for the parcel tax in the survey. What was the reason why? So you can see here, among those who voted yes in the final vote in the survey on the parcel tax, we asked, why did you vote yes? And we heard a variety of things. This was an open-ended question that's been categorized into these categories you see on the slide, and then we tallied what portion are saying each of these things. When it comes down to it, many of those who are voting yes say that they're doing that because they support quality education and they support the future for students in the schools. Among those who are voting no, we wanted to see what is their rationale. So for those who voted no in the final vote on the parcel tax in the survey, when we asked why, the most common reasons were just a general opposition to taxes, don't want taxes to be high, and then this perception that there is a mismanagement of funds. So putting all of this data together, I know it's a lot, but wanted to make sure you saw these results. While a parcel tax looks potentially viable for a November ballot, these data do suggest that the addition of a bond on the same ballot might put the parcel tax renewal in a little bit of jeopardy. A bond is within the margin of error for passage, and we do see that support increases once voters hear about the benefits. However, given circumstances, the recent May election results, we think that 2 measures could be a bit of a heavy lift. We see that voters think that the quality and safety of school buildings are good at this time. And specific priorities that would be funded by the bond are a little less important to voters overall relative to priorities that could be funded by a parcel tax renewal. And so this all kind of leads us to the conclusion that additional time might be necessary to ensure voters are aware of the need for the projects that could be funded by a bond measure. And we know that there's a great amount of urgency to renew a parcel tax at this time. So with that, happy to answer questions. Joined by Jared for additional questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
And this might not be exactly a question for you. What was the final tally on E percentage vote? Oh, okay. I'm curious because so what I did in kind of preparation for absorbing some of this information was I went back to the May of 2023 meeting and looked through some of the same data just to kind of see like, all right, after May, how's this all shaking out now? And I think the surprising thing is if I'm comparing your split B parcel tax renewal data, from during the survey vote progression phase of your study that you did, it's so close. It's so close to that data before. So in May, when we had initially looked at this for the renewal parcel tax, it was 70% initial, 71% after info, 66% after negatives, which is only like 1 percentage point off from the split B. So I'm just curious, kind of with a plus or minus, what was it, 3.46 was your margin of error?
That's for the overall sample. It's good.
What is the margin of error for split B, or is there?
It's 4.9 percentage points. So
4.9. Okay. Is 63 was the final? Okay. So within the margin of error. The wrong way.
The wrong way. Yeah, I mean, those poll results were from a little more than a year ago.
Yeah.
And so we modeled a different electorate in that polling. And at that point in time, we were seeing pretty high support for a partial tax renewal. We tested a slightly different measure at the time, but it certainly is a good point that we've seen in polling support above 2/3 for a partial tax.
And what was the so you said you kind of modeled a different cohort. What does that look like compared to the March 2023 survey that you did?
So in March of 2023, we were modeling special election voters. We were looking at a potential November 2023 election. And the modeling for such an election is similar to what we might think, who we might think would turn out for a special election in any year, although 2024 is a little bit unique. So we weren't specifically looking at a special election in 2024 in that survey, but essentially it has a lot more higher propensity voters than the model that we created for this likely voter electorate.
The March 23 had higher propensity voters compared to this has a little bit more of a general election.
Yes.
Okay. Big.
Because it's all about.
And I'm not
looking
getting
at
at anything. I'm
turnout.
just scratching
Yeah.
it, trying to
we're just
understand the
learning.
data. Yep. Trying to understand what the lift would be to.
And remember that in the polling that we did in March of 2023, we were polling for the parcel tax with the CPI renewal. And then we were polling also for the supplemental parcel tax as well, the $98 measure F.
And didn't we also poll for no sunset at that time?
That's
Decided not to go that way, but it was part of the polling,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Got any
or-
more things to
Yeah.
stretch?
No, no, I'm just looking through, but don't wait on me. It's nothing pending that I can't. I mean, so the intent of this is for us to hear this, absorb this data in July, give direction, or do you want some direction now? Dr.
Well, thank you for the question,
Yeah.
trustee Van Z. I think what I'd like to do is I would like to bring two resolutions to the July meeting. And then we can make a decision at the July meeting to whether or not we want to do, we know we need to do the parcel tax. We have to decide if we're going to do a bond at the same time. And so this would giving some time now, some space between this meeting and the July meeting. We can make a decision then whether or not we want to put both measures on the ballot. If we decide not to put on a bond measure in November, then the next time we would go out for a bond measure would be in 2026.
And it could be the primary in 2026, right? Which would be a June election, correct?
It could be,
Because the
yes.
presidentials are March and the gubernatorial are.
And so what we would do then at the board meeting in July is we would table the resolution. We wouldn't vote it down. We would just table it and bring it back later. So
But
that would allow
Isn't
us.
it likely that we would probably need to poll again if it's a year and a half, almost
Yes.
2 years later anyway?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
Because I mean, I know that it's your plan and I hope it's okay if I'm just thinking out loud, but when I look at the polling results for doing both in November, I'm not sure it's worth the time to put that resolution together if we're looking at the polling results and saying, I mean, you said yourself, we can't risk not passing the parcel tax.
We absolutely have to pass the parcel tax.
Do we know if the state's gonna have a bond measure yet? November?
Well, I hear that it's going to be on the ballot. I mean,
They just have to pick which one.
Yeah.
But okay. And then if we wait until 26, what kind of money are we leaving on the table, or is that not gonna be an issue in terms of getting money from that through that state bond measure reimbursement money?
well, the bucket is not bottomless. And, we have to raise money in order to apply for additional funds.
Right,
So we would essentially be putting ourselves at the back of the line,
okay.
hoping that there's money left. So it could potentially affect our ability to apply for and receive state reimbursement. Or matching dollars, rather.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it, this is more of like an election kind of question maybe we would need two separate committees for a bond and a parcel tax. It would have to be kind of separate campaigns. Yeah, yeah.
When it's two things that are related, I
Yeah.
can see it being easier, but a bond and a parcel tax are different animals, different passage rates, different information to share, different case to be made.
Yeah. In your polling, was there any questioning around appetite for another election, another campaign, or was that, based on the fact that we just are coming off of a special election that felt a little defeating?
We felt that that was important, a point that might be brought up by opponents. And so we tested that as an opposition statement. There was just an election where there were two measures on the ballot. And so that certainly was a convincing reason to oppose for a good number of voters.
If I might add to that, the survey is based on sort of all the likely voters, not necessarily the folks who worked on that, which I think is part of your question, right? Because that's a subgroup. And so one thing I would definitely counsel is, now you have the data. I mean, whatever you choose to do, a strong campaign is going to be needed to do it. And you want to give yourself the best possible chances of success. And so I think thinking about that and talking about it with the folks who are going to have to walk this walk with you is probably valuable, set of conversations to have, in order to get ready. I mean, I think, yeah, the data is one thing that Jessica showed in her polling is, the question that she and her group like to ask is, I think high quality schools are important, even if it means raising taxes. And they've asked that over time for 20 years, in this district. And what you're seeing is that the no side of that is kind of nosing right up around that 2/3 barrier, which means there just really isn't much margin for error in your electorate around the parcel tax anymore. We also found in May that it was really challenging to kind of pull all the resources together. The district has grown quite a bit in terms of voters to talk to in 15 years, 10 years. And you've also lost some of your commercial, some of the folks who used to participate in bond in parcel tax campaigns. Some of the employers, some of the other businesses that were here, some of that is gone. And so there was a little bit of I think that was part of the struggle in the spring was, how do we raise enough money to talk to all these people? And so these are all kind of factors that, have to be thought about as you look ahead to, this decision. I wish it was an easier decision. Obviously, it'd be much better if we had gotten the straight renewal done. One thing that is stronger about the parcel tax in the fall than it was in the spring is we did have the inflator on it, so we weren't able to say it was a no tax rate increase. This poll, we did model it as a no tax rate increase, which is to your point, board member Vanzi, is that it still didn't really pull much higher, which suggests the electorate maybe has come down a little bit in the last year or so in its appetite for these things. And that would be very consistent with polling we're seeing all over the state, that it's been sort of a steady downward trend. I think in some ways your spring election was just kind of caught in some of that trend. We've got lots of conversations we're having with boards all over the state that are, downsizing their asks, or in some cases deciding not to go in 24 because the electorate trend is kind of like that a little bit. So the good news is that was the strongest argument in your poll was not raising taxes to continue to maintain schools was very attractive. And that was also the most appealing thing about the bond scenario was that you could do it as a no tax rate increase. So that would end up being kind of the value proposition to the community is we're not raising taxes. We're just continuing existing funding streams. And there's a way I think you can make that same argument about a potential bond as well. But, to your point, board member Hurd, that's two measures is harder to talk about than one measure. So I wish there was like an easy, route forward here, but I do think it is the kind of thing where it's probably worth deliberating a little bit, talking to folks and thinking about, it's an important walk forward in November. The parcel tax has to get renewed. What's the best way to do that with, kind of the highest degree of success?
And I think no matter what we do, we have to get through to our community about the importance of either thing. Parcel tax should be a little fresher on people's minds because they went through it. And I think the complexity and the difficulty of the 2/3, you could say it over and over again, but I think they felt it on Wednesday, May 8th, when they went, what? It didn't pass? And so either thing, either option, either measure needs full engagement, everyone on deck at every single site, union groups, parents, and I think especially with the climate that this general election will have, you can't rely on mail pieces to get your message out. It needs to be everybody knocking on doors, talking to people on wearing your button everywhere you go, talking to people on a soccer field and baseball fields and everything, because it's going to take that heavy lift of education and the just the conversation about how badly it's needed for among people who don't usually want to talk about stuff like this. And with the bond, I think the workshop we had was really, really encouraging about what the plan is and the needs. But a lot of the needs are not really visible needs. If you work at one of those schools that needs a modernization, you're very familiar with the needs. But because the buildings have been upgraded and have been well maintained for over 20 years, it's not very visible. And so I think the lift on convincing about a bond measure will also have to be very engaging. I mean, it takes me back to 2002 when I was a parent at Country Club with little tiny kids, and Cindy was there with me. And I remember the assistant principal from Cal High came and talked about what it was like to walk around during passing periods at Cal High. And she was a young, athletic, woman, and she talked about getting bumped by kids. And she said you could just feel how it gets that, hey, what'd you hit me thing for? And she got through to us, even though our kids weren't going to be there for years, the need for that bond. And then we're going to have the same kind of really frank conversations to help people understand why you have to keep investing in these modernizations. And, we got on that good 10-year cycle, and then thanks to the pandemic, we got off of it. But and the hope is to get back on it, to get caught up on our modernizations. But I really worry about how quickly we can get people up to speed on that to be voting on it in November.
And Jared, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So when we had this discussion last year, I remember there was some data that you were alluding to about sometimes multiple measures on a ballot of any sort can lead to higher propensities for certain ones to pass. At least that's what I had heard. It seems like our data on this one, though, is saying not necessarily with parcel and bond for the same school district to ask.
Well, I think it's fair to say our experience in the spring was that it was, every conversation you had, you don't necessarily get twice as much attention from the voter. And you have to then have two conversations in the space of whatever attention span they give you instead of one conversation. So I think that was sort of our hands-on experience doing it in May. Was, people had to understand the difference between E and F and why both. And I think, kind of went into it thinking E was going to be an easy, quick conversation. And then we could make the case to keep some of these one-time dollars that you guys didn't want to walk away from. And I think we found that we couldn't really have either conversation as effectively as we wanted because it was split in half. So I think that's when, if, you hear board member Hurd talking about what kind of engagement is needed, can you get everybody to sit and listen to you for twice as long to talk about both of the measures? I think that's part of what you kind of have to think about is, is it as straightforward as just let us keep the tax rates where they are and we'll keep doing great stuff? Is that going to be a simple enough statement that people will not ask you to go into detail? And if that's going to be enough, maybe that's enough.
Yeah. One thing I might like to see I'm not asking for it now, is last time we had this conversation too, there was a little bit of kind of don't know exactly what the dollar figure is for the special election. So is there a way for us to look and see how much was it actually in May? Because I've heard a few different numbers and seen it reported. And I just would like to get absolute clarity on that. And then two, what would be the cost for November comparatively from the county registrar?
It's in the cover memo for this item.
Is it?
It was
Okay.
like 450 to 700, I think is what
Well, I saw, kind of a range there.
Yeah,
Was it 450, 700? I thought it was less than that.
that's what I have in my head.
So, okay,
So,
I could be wrong.
right. We have not received the final bill yet for the May election.
Okay.
But I will request the registrar's office accelerate that. It really is what the way that they calculate the cost is based on how many measures are on the ballot and how much basically property are we taking? How much portion of the ballot do we use? So if we have, one measure, two measures, three measures, four measures, depends on if nobody else has anything on the ballot, then we're covering the whole thing. Yes.
Yeah, that just might be helpful to know of, kind of how do we assume the risk reward for it?
So what I wrote in the cover memo is that the estimated cost range is between $2.50 and $4 per voter. No, $2.50 to $4 per voter, which could be in the range of 220,000 to 400,000.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. I closed my computer.
Thank you. So it seems like substantially, and that's for doing parcel alone or parcel and bond?
to do two measures.
to two measures.
And
So
one measure may cost the same amount. It
Okay.
again, it depends on
it's like-
how much real
that-
estate we get.
Maybe, yeah. okay.
Yes.
But-
And by the way, remember, we have the different trustee areas.
Yep.
So let's say, for example, in trustee Clark's area, she's on the ballot, her seat's on the ballot with other measures. So that area might cost a little bit more. So it's an aggregate of each of the trustee areas.
The SRVUSD is taken up.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you remind us when the current bond measure, when that's done? Is it already
2012 was when it was passed.
right? it
And
ended?
we have roughly $1 million remaining.
Okay.
You spend it all, yes.
And remember the curve bar graphs they showed at the workshop? It's not like the parcel tax where in this year you don't pay it anymore. It
Right.
tapers off. Okay.
Oh, and then yes, they will be paid off in 2032, 33-ish. That'll be measure A and measure D.
I would maybe recommend for us as a board that we take this month and maybe we break up who speaks with which partners, whether it's you know, whether it's our union partners or PTA or you know, various community groups, to kind of just get a sense of what level of engagement they might have an appetite for, so that that can kind of help us in terms of getting a better sense of how robust this campaign can actually be.
Yeah, as well as the funding. I think that would be an interesting question to see is, you know, I know we had some amount of community support and funding for it, but it'd be interesting to see if we went back to the well again. So what we could expect.
I'm a little confused about some of the decisions it looks like some of you are struggling with. So if we have to pass this renewal or say bye-bye to $6.8 million and make the cuts that we're looking at go from 16.5 million to 6.8, and to be able to run this measure with no tax increase, I see November as the only option on when to do that, because the only other option is another special election in the spring, which I think our community would say hell no, right?
Yeah.
Because of the cost, but also because of the waiting. We would have to be issuing pink slips for those 50 positions, whereas if we pass in November, those positions are safe.
Yeah, my question is more about whether to add the bond.
So I
to do
think
one or
if we
two.
could go back to the slide that shows the poll results for running both. And everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and if you want a month to think about it, fine. But
This one or the progression, I think is what you're looking at.
the one that showed what happened as you asked, you started, you gave good information, then you gave opposition. That is not a positive number to be going into a parcel tax campaign that requires 66.7%
On the split A,
on the split.
which wouldn't really, I mean,
The second one means we better run a really good campaign.
no, and I see your point. It's kind of like, well, because I think you might have even said it a little different. So we have to reduce 16.5. If we don't pass the parcel tax, it's an additional 6.5 on top of that. So it's not even, 6.8, right? So even so we're modeling in a passage of a
Yeah.
renewal.
Yeah, that was, Stella was really clear about that last week.
Looking at the numbers, I don't feel like we can put the parcel tax at risk. So I am leaning towards putting all of our resources into getting that passed in November. And then waiting until 26 to do a bond.
Because I'm looking at it too, Shelley, in terms of that. Well, I understand what Dr. Kemp was suggesting about let's bring 2 resolutions forward. This tells me that we would be better off spending that month putting the parcel tax measure together and getting the committee together and starting.
I agree. Having to run a campaign takes a while to set up. And to get buy-in and to do all the things you need to do to.
Get a committee, get
Yep.
people on board, start raising money.
Well, hopefully with some of the canvassing and targeting and stuff, it's not as, you don't have to completely reinvent the wheel since it was done so soon, but. Yeah, I think that there's still gonna be a lot. We're gonna have to get through the noise of the November election and get past all that stuff as well too. Yeah, and so you're suggesting don't even mess around with the bond right now because time is short and it looks like the data's.
That's my take.
Yeah.
If you guys want to keep discussing it, we can, but I just, we have to win this. And we have to come together to do this way better than we did in the spring. It means all of us out walking. It means all of our staff members on their own time. It means huge engagement in raising money so that people feel like they're part of something and now they're committed to passing it. When we do this right here, we do it really well. And I think we were just really rusty. And I think a lot of people, it hasn't been done since 2015. A lot of our families haven't had to do this before. A lot of our staff members had never done it before. I mean, if you think back of how much just leadership change we have at sites, it's a new thing. And we need to be clearer about expectations and breaking it up into smaller pieces, because the group that really put in the effort on this last one really did, but there wasn't enough people. And it's going to be harder because we got to get through all the other stuff that will be on that ballot.
There's going to be other stuff for sure. And I think it was a huge problem that a lot of our community and parents especially hadn't been through it before, and they didn't understand the ramifications of it not passing. I think we have to be a lot more clear about what is going to happen if it doesn't pass, because I think that maybe that message didn't get through in a clear kind of way, especially to the people who had never heard of a parcel tax before. And as many schools as you and I visited and talked, it still wasn't enough. And I'll go do it again and talk to all of them again and more. But I will also have my own that I'm going to be dealing with also. So that's another complication.
So this is informational, so we can't take action. Can we give direction and consensus?
Yes.
So based on what Rachel's proposing, does anyone have any additional thoughts for, against, around?
Yeah, I'm thinking that, yeah, looking again at the data, if it's safer to, right, put all of our efforts in parcel tax, and really parcel tax, we need the parcel tax. There is no money coming from any other sources, right? Like we can't go to the state and say, hey, we need some more money. That's not going to happen. So been looking around, right? Like raise the base. No, even the state now with their deficit, they're not even looking at that, considering that. So parcel tax is really the only thing that we can do. And I am all for the bond being on a FOAC, looking at, how we will need a future bond in order to support some of the growth areas, and modernization. But I'm thinking, yeah, if we really need to do a parcel tax, we should put all our energy in that, because again, noise in November, and to, yeah, everyone's already been saying that we need more information, or we need more education around our funding, right, to everyone. So
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree that, losing the month while we think about and decide, could potentially have a negative impact on the campaign. And so I feel like, um, it's just a bummer because we need both. We need, but what can, what can we actually get, right? And based on what we saw in May, I think we need to put all, to your point, we need to just put all of our energy, what felt like limited, well, we need to put all of our energy into the thing that we really, really, really have to have instead of spreading it because our energy is limited. So.
So we can give direction. Are we in agreement to give direction that we want to move forward with the parcel tax and for staff to come back with a plan for that?
I think so. I mean, I'm in agreement. I think,
Yeah.
yeah. And I would ask us to kind of think about what can we do in the meantime as a board, to, to kind of get the ball rolling.
And you mean by like communication and outreach and
Yeah,
touching
and
base with
to
people?
Rachel's point, what we need around, really kind of talking with community members around a committee, kind of, getting things in place so that when we do take action in July, we can hit the ground running, as opposed to then taking the time to set up and do the organizational part of things.
I've had a lot of people ask me, so when is this happening? They're assuming it's happening.
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
kind of want us to get moving.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they know how critical it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much. We'll be back with a resolution for the parcel tax on July 23rd. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. All right, so now we just have administrative matters. So board reports. So I know we just had a meeting last week, but Rachel, anything?
I'll just add that I was up in Sacramento for CSBA's Annual Education Conference Committee the other day. And I don't know if you recall, if you've ever noticed in the catalogs, but there are critical issues in each of the strands. And so I'm going to be working on the one for access for all. And it looks like we have a lead on a very motivational MTSS speaker who's worked with school districts. And so I'm excited that I get to plan that. And I also learned a little bit of the back end stuff about why the reservations filled up. I know this is something that Cindy tears her hair out because she tries to get our reservations to go and she calls it 8 o'clock and they're all full. And it's because districts that made a lot of workshop proposals reserve rooms for their potential workshop presenters. I never even thought about this behind the curtain thing. So it's why after presentations are picked, now all of a sudden rooms open up, and that's why it all kind of changes in August or September. So we may all get where we want to be and not have any problem. And our district did submit a workshop proposal related to our literacy work. So I'm really anxious to hear if we get picked or not, but which I don't know yet. So that's all I have.
Not much for me. I mean, kids are enjoying sleeping in. At some point we'll start turning the TV off sooner in the morning. And no, we're just enjoying summer. Happy belated Father's Day to everybody. And yeah, that's all I got.
I have a couple of things because I wasn't here last week. First of all, wanted to have a shout out to Iron Horse Middle School for their promotion, and I had attended with Dr. Malloy. That was fun. And also a very special thank you to Cal High. I attended their graduation, and it was a very special one. This one is a very special one for me and my family. And thank you, Demetrius, and all your team, because usually, right, like, okay, so my twin nephews are 2 of them. So usually, right, they go one of the other. I'm like, oh, I'll only get to really personally, right, present the diploma holder to only one, but wasn't gonna make any waves. But they actually, they actually did it so that both of them came up. So it was very, very special. So thank you, Hell High. Wanted to, it's not here, so I'll talk to him next time, but congratulate Travis Hodges for now being on our board. I think you and I probably met him. I think I met him like at a PTA convention or something like that, and then saw several, not all, but saw several things that he's been doing, and was like, oh, that's like, a student that's really, really engaged and involved and doing great things. So I am very, very happy and looking forward to working and learning from him. And lastly, I was very upset that I was not here in person for the official Dr. Malloy send-off, but I am very glad that I get to recognize you this meeting. We have this meeting, but thank you so much for all that you've done for us this past 4 years. Really thankful that we had your knowledge, your experience, your perspective to actually not only push us, but allow us to push ourselves to improve, right? Our district for all of our students. And really enjoy working with you. I mean, I'm just very, very happy that through your leadership, we have our strategic directions and of course a learner profile. So again, thank you and best of luck to your new national role. And please, stay in touch.
So this last week, I had the pleasure of attending the elementary school principals end of year celebration and supplied all the desserts and treats and got to tell them thank you for all their hard work, which I really love doing. And I also did the same thing for the assistant principals who gathered here and made all kinds of desserts and hung out with them and had lunch. And it's just so great to be able to say thank you to the people who work with our students on a daily basis and our staff. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I hope everybody will consider joining me at the Museum of the San Ramon Valley soiree this weekend. I will be making 150 desserts for that. And the Museum of the San Ramon Valley supports the one-room schoolhouse where all of our third grade students each year, and both of my kids went, and my son hated dressing up as a pioneer or whatever, but he went anyway, and they learn about what it's like to go to school in a one-room schoolhouse. So that's this weekend, starting at 5 o'clock out at the one-room schoolhouse, and I'll be out there rain or shine, and I think it's going to shine like 98 degrees, but it's really a fun event.
Thank you. I don't have much except to wish everyone a really restful and restorative summer break and to say goodbye to Dr. Malloy again. Thank you for everything. And we look forward to welcoming CJ Kamak. So thank you. All right, so meeting adjourned.